In a snow-laced town, a grieving widow who was thrown out of her house and a struggling single father built a quiet life together, slowly turning heartbreak into home. Through shared kindness and gentle healing, they create a shelter for others, naming it after love and legacy. Let us begin this story. The desert wind carried stories in its dust. Forgotten ones, mostly. Old wheels skidding off heat-split roads. Prayers whispered into cracked dashboards. Babies crying in silence because there was no one left to hear them. That afternoon, the sky hung low, the sun sharp as shattered glass, and the wind scraped along the bones of the town that had given up whispering its name. That's when Caleb saw her. Her car sat lopsided on the shoulder. It was smoking faintly as if the heat had finally gotten tired of waiting. The woman stood with both hands pressed to her temples, her back stiff, as two toddlers dozed in their car seats behind her, cheeks smudged with sweat and sleep. Caleb slowed his truck. Without thinking, gravel spitting up like a warning. He hated stopping, not because he didn't care, because he cared too much. He pulled over anyway. He left the engine running. "Need help?" he asked from the driver's seat, voice gravel soft, like it hadn't been used much today. The woman looked up. She was younger than he'd expected, mid-30s maybe, but there were years under her eyes. She nodded without speaking. Her name, he'd find out later, was Elise. The repair shop wasn't much. Just a rusted sign half swinging in the wind, and a garage built like it had been slapped together by tired hands. The inside smelled like gasoline, old paper, and the burnt memory of better days. But it was home to Caleb and his 7-year-old son, Ethan, or what was left of a home. He didn't say much as he pulled the woman's dead car into the bay, just pointed toward a bench near the office. She lifted both girls out carefully, one at a time, Hope and Hazel, soft-haired, wide-eyed little things, looking around like they were trying to decide if this was the kind of place where bad dreams started or ended. Ethan peeked out from behind the beaded curtain that separated their living space from the shop. He looked at the girls, then his father, then back again. "Are they staying?" he asked. "Just for a bit," Caleb said. But he already knew it wasn't going to be just for a bit. Dinner was peanut butter toast and canned peaches. The girls devoured theirs like it was gold. Elise picked at hers. Caleb ate standing near the sink, arms crossed, watching the storm clouds slide in over the mountains. Ethan, curious but cautious, offered one of the girls his favorite car. "It's the fastest," he whispered. Hazel took it and nodded seriously, as if this was a pact. Elise watched that small exchange with something like heartbreak. "You two alone?" Caleb asked. Elise nodded. Their father passed last year. She didn't elaborate. Didn't have to. Caleb looked at his son. Ethan's mom, cancer. 2 years back. There was a silence between them then, not heavy, just honest. Like when two people set down their grief at the same table and realize it takes the same shape. That night, Elise lay on the cot in the loft above the shop, her daughters curled against her like commas in a long, unfinished sentence. Caleb let her use the space, brought up extra blankets without saying a word. Before heading down the ladder, he set a flashlight beside her pillow, just in case. Below, Ethan was asleep, the small fan rattling beside his bunk bed. Caleb sat at the kitchen table, nursing a chipped mug of instant coffee, staring at a photo of his wife tucked behind the sugar jar. Her name was Maya. He could still remember how she used to fix things, not with tools, but with her hands on his shoulders and words that made him believe again. "You'd like her," he whispered to the photo. "She's kind." Outside, thunder rolled low like a faraway drum. The desert didn't cry often, but when it did, it sounded like sorrow pretending to be a lullaby. Morning brought dust, dry air, and quiet resolve. Elise was already up, helping clean up oil rags and reorganize bolts on the pegboard. She didn't ask, just moved gently around the space like someone who'd learned that asking was often met with no. "You don't have to do that," Caleb said, voice still coated in sleep. She looked at him and shrugged. "It helps me think." He nodded. "Let it be." The girls played with Ethan in the back of the garage. They'd turned an old cardboard box into a spaceship. Their giggles were soft but sharp enough to pierce something inside him. It had been too long since laughter had lived here. Later, as Elise stood by the bay window folding clean rags, She found a small photo pinned behind a shelf. Caleb, Maya, and baby Ethan at a county fair. Maya had a sun hat on, her head tilted back in a laugh. She was beautiful, Elise said quietly. Caleb looked up from under the hood of a car. She was... He didn't say more. He didn't need to. That evening, Caleb made grilled cheese on the shop's old stovetop. He cooked 4 sandwiches, not 3. Elise noticed. You didn't ask. You'd say no, Caleb replied. And you're not a guest. She blinked at that, swallowed, then sat. The girls shared a plate. Ethan told a story about a pretend dragon he was going to catch. Hope insisted she'd already caught it. Hazel just grinned with cheese on her chin. You're good with him, Caleb said to Elise after the kids were tucked in. I try. She paused. I wasn't enough for his family, though. After he died, they blamed me. For what? For things going wrong. Business failures. Luck. You'd be surprised how easy it is for people to call a woman cursed when they need a reason. Caleb said nothing. He just picked up a cloth and wiped down the counter slowly. Elise, he said softly, as if testing the name. You're not cursed. Her throat caught, but she nodded. I know. Some days I even believe it. That night, wind howled through the cracks in the garage walls. Caleb stood outside in a hoodie and jeans, staring up at the sky as clouds tore across the moon. Elise joined him, wrapping her arms around herself. I should leave soon, she said. He turned. Where would you go? I don't know. Somewhere. That's not a plan. No, she smiled faintly. It's a defense mechanism. They stood in silence a moment. Ethan's happy, Caleb said finally. He hasn't played like that in a long time. Elise, he added, voice low, you don't have to go just because it's what people expect. She looked at him, eyes shining in the moonlight. And if I stay, she asked. Then I fix the loft roof, he said simply, before it leaks on the girls. She laughed then. Not loud, but real. And for the first time in too long, it didn't echo back like loneliness. The next few days unfolded slowly, like pages turning in a soft wind. Elise made herself useful, fixing an old coffee maker, cleaning the office windows, organizing logbooks. Caleb watched her from a distance, quiet appreciation blooming into something he didn't name. Ethan drew a picture. For people, a truck and a garage. He handed it to Elise. That's you, he said, pointing to the woman in the middle. Elise pressed a drawing to her chest, her smile a little unsteady. Thank you. She kept it under her pillow that night. A week passed. She never meant to stay that long. But the days grew softer. The girls slept better. Ethan told stories over breakfast. And Caleb kept showing up with small kindnesses. A fixed latch, a scarf folded beside her cup, silence that didn't ask anything of her. He found her one morning sitting on the garage steps with her eyes closed, breathing in the scent of oil and dust and heat like it was incense. I forgot what peace felt like, she whispered. He sat beside her. Maybe it's time you remembered. On the 8th night, it rained. Elise stayed up, listening to the water hit the roof, the soft creak of the old building settling. She got up and pulled out the drawing Ethan gave her. The paper was wrinkled now, a little smudged, but it still held. She turned it over. On the back, in a child's handwriting, were 4 names. Dad, me, Hazel, Hope, and below them, one final name, penciled in softer, like a hope not yet spoken aloud. Elise. She held it to her chest and cried quietly into the dark, not because she was sad, but because something inside her was stitching itself back together. Outside, the desert rain wept like it was blessing the broken. Inside, a woman and her daughters slept under a patched roof, and a man sat awake at the kitchen table, whispering thank you to the quiet. The first snowfall came quietly, as if it had tiptoed across the rooftops in its bare feet. Daniel had left a single porch light burning that night, its amber glow flickering in the hush. And when Elise stepped outside before dawn to breathe in the cold, her breath hung like a ghost before her face. In the soft silence, she could hear the twin girls' faint giggles behind the door, sticky fingers poking at toast, Lena helping them spread jam. She didn't know it then, but something had already shifted. They were no longer guests. Not exactly. There were boots now by the door that weren't theirs, and a scarf of Daniel's draped over the stair rail, like it had always lived there. On the fridge, a drawing. 2 tall stick figures and 3 little ones, scribbled in purple crayon. And above it, a crooked magnet that read, "Hope is quiet, but it stays. Mornings pass in rituals." Daniel rose first, always, the smell of coffee and motor oil filling the air like some strange prayer. Elise would follow, wrapping the girls in sweaters and brushing their hair while they sang off-key songs about snowflakes and candy. He'd set aside a mug for her, always on the left side of the counter, always filled halfway like he remembered she didn't finish it all. It was such a small thing. But kindness, she'd come to believe, often hid in the smallest folds of the day. She learned the rhythm of his work. How he muttered to engines like they were old friends. How he knelt beside rusted wheels like a man kneeling at an altar. His hands were scarred and stained and careful. One morning, after dropping off a neighbor's fixed van, he returned to find her mending the torn lining of his work coat. She didn't say anything, just threaded the needle again, eyes low, hands steady. He didn't speak either, just stood there, watching her. Then softly, "Nobody's touched that coat since." He didn't finish. She didn't ask. There was a silence between them that wasn't hollow. It was the kind that held space, like a quilt spread over grief. A silence that understood some things didn't need words to be shared. That winter, they taught each other how to live again in pieces. Elise began cooking in the evenings, modest meals warm and steady. Her late husband had always ordered takeout. This was different. This was ritual. A chopped onion, a steaming pot, the clink of forks. Daniel set up a crib in the corner of the spare room. He found it at a junk sale and fixed the slats until they no longer wobbled. The girls slept curled into each other like halves of a whole, breathing in tandem. Lena would sometimes tiptoe in after midnight, tuck the blanket tighter around them, and kiss their foreheads. One night, Daniel caught her doing it. He didn't say a word, just stood at the doorway and nodded once, like her quiet care made something inside him unclench. Later that week, Elise found a letter tucked into one of the girls' picture books. Her name was written on it, shaky and uneven. It was from Lena. "I don't know what you believe in, but I think maybe my mom sent you. The little ones laugh more now. My dad smiles more. You're not just someone who needed help. Maybe you're someone who helped us too. I hope you stay. I hope you know that." Elise held the letter to her chest for a long time before folding it gently, placing it in the drawer beside the bed, under her late husband's old photograph, now dusty, now fading. Some nights, after the house was quiet, Daniel would sit on the back porch and stare out into the snow, a beer in one hand, an old photo in the other. Elise joined him once. The cold didn't bite. It simply breathed. He passed her the photo, a woman with eyes like Lena's and a laugh frozen mid-frame. "She used to make snow angels in the backyard," he said. Elise didn't reply. She simply handed him a small, worn ribbon. Pale blue, the kind you get from the hospital, one of the girls' first. She never got to hold them, she said. "I named them both from her lullaby journal. They sat that way for a long time, 2 people holding different kinds of loss in the same quiet air. And in that shared hush, something softened. One afternoon, a storm blew through town, knocking out the power. The twins cried. Lena lit candles. Daniel pulled out an old guitar. Its strings were rusted, voice soft and unsure, but he played anyway. Elise sang. Her voice was thin at first, trembling, but by the second verse, it grew, like a stream turning into a river. The girls curled up by the fire. Lena leaned against Elise's shoulder. Daniel strummed softer. The storm raged outside, but inside, something steady had been kindled. Later that week, they built a snowman together in the yard. The twins insisted on giving it Daniel's scarf. Elise found herself laughing, real, unguarded laughter, as snow slipped down her collar, and the girls tackled Lena into a pile of powder. She caught Daniel watching her. This time, he didn't look away. That night, as she folded laundry, she found a drawing from one of the twins. Not a stick-figure family this time, but something else. A house. 5 windows. Light in all of them. She traced her finger over the door. They still didn't speak of the future. There was too much fragility in their present, but it lived between the lines. In the way Daniel scraped ice from her windshield before sunrise. In the way Elise stitched his name into the corner of a towel. In the way Lena started calling the girls my sisters without blinking. One day, the woman from the shelter came by. The one who had helped Elise when she'd first arrived in town. She brought news. Legal news. The business Elise's late husband had been part of, the one that had gone under and sparked so much blame, had settled a claim. Quietly. And because of her name still being attached, because she'd signed nothing away, a portion of assets had been transferred to her. A fortune, they said. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just stood there in the cold, holding the letter. That night, Elise didn't tell Daniel. She sat at the edge of the bed, the paper folded once, twice, pressed against her knee. Her daughters slept on either side of her, their tiny breaths rising and falling like waves. She looked around the room, mismatched furniture, old wallpaper, love tucked into corners, and whispered, "This is already enough." In the morning, she made French toast. Daniel raised a brow. Special occasion? She just smiled. Something like that. The girls danced to the radio. Lena braided their hair with string and buttons. Daniel fixed a creaky drawer. Life, it seemed, continued without asking permission. But Elise had a plan now. Not to leave. No, never that. But to build something from all the small kindnesses they'd been living inside. A space for others. A haven. A shelter. Like this house had been to her. And when she was ready, when the snow began to thaw, she would tell Daniel everything. Not with numbers or banks or checks, but with a key, a blueprint, a promise. Not just a fortune, but a future. The wind had teeth that week, sharp and aching. It rattled the eaves, whispered through the window panes, and chased the smoke from the chimney until it vanished into the pewter sky. Inside, the house held its breath. Firelight danced against the old wooden floors. The twins were curled like kittens by the hearth, their cheeks pink with the cold that never quite stayed outside. Lena sat cross-legged behind them, brushing their hair with quiet concentration, each stroke a kind of prayer. Daniel watched from the threshold, a mug warming his hands. Elise stood in the kitchen, back turned, humming low beneath her breath. She stirred something on the stove, cinnamon, maybe, apples. The scent clung to the air like memory. These were the days that passed without announcement, the kind that didn't ask to be remembered, but stayed anyway, like an old quilt, fraying the edges, warm with use. Outside, the snow had softened everything. Sound, edges, grief. Lena had begun calling Elise Mama when she thought no one was listening. Not always. Just when the girls clung to her skirts, and Elise leaned down with that look in her eyes. Not the look of someone replacing anyone, but the look of someone returning home without meaning to. Daniel heard it once. At the doorway. He didn't enter. Just stood in the cold and let the words settle in his chest like a match caught on kindling. He never mentioned it. But that night, he left a folded blanket at the foot of Elise's bed, the one he used to keep packed away in a cedar trunk, his late wife's favorite, the one she used on the porch during summer storms. Elise didn't speak when she found it, but she wept into it quietly, gratefully, beneath the hush of midnight and the ticking of the old clock. Later that week, a box arrived, heavy and unmarked. Daniel had gone to pick up a used part for a customer's car and returned with it tucked under his arm. "I found something," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. She opened it slowly. Inside, the smallest winter coats. 2 matching ones, rose-colored with tiny wooden buttons. And a third, larger one, dark green, wool-lined, sturdy. Elise touched the sleeves like she was afraid they'd vanish. "For the girls," Daniel said, voice rough. "And for you, if you plan on walking with us." It was the closest thing to an invitation he'd ever spoken. And Elise, with a smile trembling at the corners, simply nodded. "I do." The next morning, they walked to the frozen pond near the edge of town. The path was half buried in snow, but Daniel knew the way like muscle memory. Lena pulled the girls on a sled made from old plywood and rope. Elise carried a thermos of cocoa. The ice sparkled like glass. The sky was still. Daniel laced up the skates he'd kept all these years. Hidden in a box with name written in fading pen, Clara, his wife's. He held them for a moment, then passed them to Elise. They should be used, he said, not left in the dark. Elise looked at him, unsure, but he just smiled, that quiet, aching smile, and nodded toward the pond. She stepped onto the ice, unsteady at first, then smoother. Laughed as she spun once, arms outstretched. The twins clapped. Lena shouted. Daniel stood still, hands in his pockets, watching a ghost turn into something living again. That night, he found her at the sink, drying dishes. You skate like someone who danced once, he said. I did, she replied softly. A long time ago. Before. He leaned on the counter beside her. You still do. She didn't answer, just reached over and gently placed one of the dried plates on the shelf, the one he always missed. A few nights later, Lena came to Elise holding a small notebook. Its cover was worn, pages soft at the corners. I thought maybe you could keep writing it, she said. Mom used to call it our love ledger. She wrote things down when she couldn't say them. Elise opened it. Inside, dates, drawings, little notes. One read, Daniel fixed the door today without me asking. Said he liked when I slept without worry. Another, Lena called a bird skyflower. I think that's what poetry is. Elise ran her fingers over the ink, like touching the past. I don't know if I'm the one, she whispered. You are, Lena said. Not instead. Just also. And Elise wrote, not much, just a line at a time. A day of snow, a coat gifted, laughter like firelight. The door opened wider. Later, Daniel read them when no one was looking. Time passed like this, in quiet folds. The auto shop needed repairs. Elise offered to help. Daniel refused at first. Stubbornness is oldest habit. But eventually relented when she showed up with paint on her cheeks and her sleeves rolled. They sanded wood and fixed shelves. She brought order to the cluttered back room. He taught her how to identify a faulty starter motor by its sound alone. One evening, he found her asleep at the counter, tools scattered, twins napping in a blanket pile beside her. He didn't wake her, just laid his jacket over her shoulders and locked the door behind him. That same week, he built a shelf by the window of her room, not for books, but for the small things she left around, her late husband's cufflinks, the twins' baby shoes. A photo of Lena and the girls, arms tangled, faces full of summer. When she noticed it, she didn't speak, just touched his hand, briefly, but it was enough. It was snowing the night, she told him, about the inheritance, the money, the plan. They sat by the fire, just the two of them, light flickering on their faces. I didn't come here to find a new life, she said. I just came to survive, but now I want to build one. He said nothing at first. Then what kind of life? A place like this. For others. For people like us. Daniel looked at her, really looked. And then, slowly, he nodded. The following morning, the five of them stood in the cold, staring at a vacant property near the edge of town. An old farmhouse. Warm but standing. The kind of place that once held stories. And could again. The twins danced in the snow. Lena took pictures. Daniel handed Elise a ring of keys, his fingers brushing hers. It wasn't a proposal, but it was a beginning. That night, they ate dinner by candlelight, not because the power was out, but because it felt right. Ritual, sacred. Elise pulled the ledger from her pocket. Read aloud. Today we looked at a broken house. It looked like us, and like us, it still stands. Ready. Daniel reached across the table, took her hand, held it longer than he needed to, and in the hush that followed, the fire crackled, the twins giggled, and Lena whispered, Mama, write that one down too. Snow fell in soft spirals that morning, not hurried, not loud, just steady, like breath. The world outside was white and hushed, and the sky held a kind of quiet grace, as if something sacred had arrived before anyone was ready. Inside the old farmhouse, warmth gathered in corners. Light filtered through sheer curtains, and the smell of bread rising mingled with the faint scent of pine wood and peppermint. Elise stood in the kitchen, tying her hair back with a ribbon that once belonged to her mother. She wasn't sure why, just that it felt like something worth remembering. Daniel knelt by the front door, helping the twins into their little boots. They giggled when he kissed their noses, one after the other, as if sealing some secret spell. Lena passed by with a camera hanging from her neck, pausing to capture a moment, Elise glancing back at Daniel, something tender and almost startled in her eyes. It had been a year, one full circle season since Elise and her girls had arrived with nothing but a dented suitcase and fear tucked under her ribs. Now the house had names carved into the doorframe, pencil lines marking growing children, shelves filled with hand-labeled jars, letters folded into books, drawings hung with clothespins across the windows. In the field behind the house stood the beginning of something more, the frame of the new shelter. A place for those like them, single parents, lost hearts, the left behind and nearly given up on. They were building it piece by piece, not just with wood and nails, but with meals shared, blankets stitched, and names remembered. Elise held the deed in her hand now. Thick paper, embossed seal, and her late husband's signature on the dotted line. She hadn't read it in a while, but this morning she brought it out again. She traced her fingers over the ink, paused at the part that had always made her ache. To Elise, should anything happen, everything becomes yours, because you never stop believing in what could grow from nothing. She folded it carefully and slipped it into the drawer beneath the stove, not out of sight, but safe, where fire and memory could keep it warm. That afternoon, a letter arrived, hand-delivered by the postmaster's niece, who squealed with delight when the twins handed her a cookie wrapped in wax paper. Daniel opened the envelope and read it aloud, sitting at the table with Elise and the children gathered close. It was from a mother in the next town over, recently widowed, 3 kids, no place to go. She'd heard what they were building, asked if it was true, that a shelter was rising from the snow. Elise looked at Daniel. He didn't say anything, just nodded. Later that night, the twins fell asleep early, cheeks pink, arms wrapped around each other like vines. Lena was in her room, stringing fairy lights along her ceiling, each bulb a wish she hadn't spoken out loud. Elise stepped onto the porch. The wind had calmed. The stars blinked softly above the dark silhouette of the unfinished shelter. Daniel followed, holding 2 mugs. They stood side by side, quiet, wrapped in the same silence that had once separated them. Now it tethered them together. Soft, sure. "You think we're ready?" she asked, voice nearly lost the cold. "We weren't ready when we began," he said, "but we're still here." She smiled, held his gaze. Then, "I was thinking of a name." He waited. "Ilera House," she said. Daniel frowned gently. "That's not your name." "It was going to be," she whispered. "My mother's name. She never had much, but she believed love could make anything feel like fortune." Daniel turned the mug in his hand. "Ilera," he repeated. "Yeah, that sounds like home." Inside, the fire snapped gently. The twins stirred but didn't wake. Elise reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a small hand-bound journal, the love ledger. She'd been writing in it every night. Not much, a line here, a moment there. Tonight, she opened it to a fresh page. January 3rd. We chose a name. Not for ourselves, but for the lives yet to come. The ones still out in the cold, hoping for someone to leave the porch light on. She set the book down beside the fire. Daniel wrapped his arm around her shoulders. And for a long while they just sat there, found, not fixed, holding everything that had been broken and built again. Together, somewhere in the distance, wind moved through bare trees like a hymn. The stars above blinked softly, steady as breath. And the house, the home, stood warm against the cold. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter.